come on to our guests for today, I would like to inform you of a meeting that was called by the contractor who's taking over community health for the whole of Suffolk, Lest Lowestoft. That's something like 540,000 people. That's you, me, your family, your friends. And basically Circle will be providing community health as a business. They will be running our community hospitals, they'll be running our district nurses, they'll be running our specialist nurses. And you may have read a few months ago that they were looking to dispense of 120 of their staff on the basis they would do that and they would improve the service delivery to you and me. So last night they made an attempt at telling us how they might do this, and it would appear the big secret for the future for them, you and me, will be the computer. And apparently the computer will enable the system to be run in such a way that the district nursing and out of community hospital nursing will increase its efficiency from a point of view of hand to hand or nurse to patient by 50%. Now, whether this gets delivered or not, only time will tell. The presentation, I thought, sadly was very poor. There were no graphics, there was no PowerPoint presentation, there was nothing that I could bring away from there to show you today. Apparently there are just on 1,000 staff. They will be getting rid of now probably 90 of those, of which 45 or so will be clinical staff. So I really have grave reservations in a community that actually is itself aging and has a higher proportion of folk who do need some support in their homes, that this structure will be able to deliver this, because it's number conscious, isn't it? Anyway, what we really want to do this morning is to talk to somebody who was actually there when the NHS came into being. That's its very first birth pangs, when, if you needed glasses or teeth or a wooden leg or an iron lung, you could actually get one prescribed for you by your GP without being terrified that you couldn't afford to pay for it. So welcome, Eric.
Hello, mate.
How are you doing? But apparently you've got no memory of it.
Oh no, I have got plenty of memory of it. Now, what's interesting is the fact, you see, you mentioned the NHS, all these free things and what have you.
Yes.
Now, when it first came in, it wasn't like that at all.
Right, so what happened?
Basically, it was going to be, see, people used to pay for the doctor. The whole system was completely different. I mean, I can remember well a Dr. Hill, and a doctor had a personal relationship with every patient, and they sort of brought you into the world. They probably looked after you all through your life, saw you get married, and brought in your grandchildren, probably signed your death certificate as well. And I remember there used to be two ways of doing it. You used to pay £0.50, I think it was, per or you used to do some scheme they had.
There was an insurance scheme, wasn't there?
You paid a penny a week, and you got the doctor free of charge.
Yes.
But he used to come out in the middle of the night, and never mind what it was. And it was a very personal thing. That man knew all about you, your family, your history, everything. And so today, this sort of, how to say, vast structure which is round us wasn't there.
No.
And the whole point, though, it was a lot better, I think. I'm being probably a heretic now, but I think people felt that it was being.
Do you think they valued it more?
Well, I don't know.
Because the consequence of not having it was premature death.
Expense is still a factor, because you take people who would like to have things done to their teeth under the NHS, but they just cannot afford the fees of the NHS dentist, and they don't get their teeth done. And so in some ways, nothing has changed.
Really?
But you don't realise, I mean, I came out back from Burma, I had malaria, and I was in hospital for a couple of months or so.
Right.
And I remember my wife, well, she wasn't my wife then, she was my secretary.
Well, as is often the case.
But she used to come every day to see me, and of course there was no ice cream anywhere. You couldn't buy ice cream. So the only place you could get it was...
we didn't turn to all the Italians, didn't we?
Oh no, well that's it.
Yes.
But I'm trying to destroy my train of thought. There was an ABC in Balham,
Yes.
with a restaurant on the corner by the tube station where you could buy ice cream,
Right.
and she used to go in there, buy me some ice cream, wrap it up with paper and and bring it to me. It must be 15, 20 miles to bring me ice cream in hospital. And
So you had a need for ice cream. Was that
Well,
the only
I-
thing you could eat, or?
it was something I needed. I felt like, and it
Yeah.
cooled me down because with malaria you
Oh,
get a
yeah.
lot of hot fevers,
Yeah.
and so that helped me considerably.
Mm.
But it just shows you how things were so different.
Yes.
And it's but the NHS came in gradually. It wasn't something which all came in with all these features. When originally it was basically how should I say, a free service, so that people could get their free doctor, free hospital, free everything, and
It wasn't it based on a national insurance contribution?
this I can't remember,
No.
but
Okay.
I mean, I think it was, and they introduced the stamp and all the rest
Okay,
of
well,
it.
let's just move swiftly on to London, Cape Town.
Oh yes, now before we got married, I think I told you last time, we had these very good friends who were partners with this steel business that we were running.
Yes.
And Malcolm and I can't remember the other boy's name, and we were going to attempt the London to Cape Town overland record,
Right.
and it stood at those days at 3 weeks, and so we organised it all, how we were going to do it. We got a lot of publicity about it, and we arranged for fuel to be put all the different stages all the way down.
Right.
And when we got married, because I think I brought in last time how we got married and went on our honeymoon,
Yep.
and the steel business crashed while I
Wow.
was away.
You were robbed,
I
Eric.
was robbed, yes. But the whole point was, just before the wedding, well, the wedding was covered by the press. Our wedding was in the evening papers.
Right.
So it was quite an event.
Right.
And the church was absolutely packed solid. It was a fascinating wedding in
Good.
Streatham. We got married because that's where my wife lived.
Right.
But just immediately after the wedding, it was found that somebody had broken the record by 5 days.
Oh dear.
And that put it right out of
Your reach.
Our reach. We couldn't
as
do it.
as sort of an amateur group.
Well,
You
this
had
is
no
it.
big sponsor then.
We
eh?
didn't have any big. We were doing it all
Did-
ourselves.
Really amazing. You wouldn't even consider it now, would you?
Well, I wouldn't mind
Really?
having a go.
No, I mean from without.
Oh,
I
without
mean
a sponsor.
sponsorship now is
It's
massive, isn't
absolutely-
it?
But
you
people
know?
used to do things for themselves.
Yes,
in
they
those
did.
days.
Indeed, they
But then,
did.
as I said, we went on our honeymoon, and interesting when I look back on it, we had an old motorbike which I bought for £5,
Really?
and it was a new Imperial, 1928, and
Wow.
people have forgotten, but the petrol tank on motorbikes used to be below the crossbar.
Yes.
And then they raised it above the crossbar, and my model was the first one which had the tank above the
Up
crossbar.
on the top, did it
Absolutely.
really?
And I ended up giving it to a motorcycle museum.
I
But that's a
bet.
long story.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other interesting thing was when we went on our honeymoon, we took it on the train with us.
Oh, did you?
Now, I can't remember. I don't know whether you're allowed to take motorbikes on trains.
Well, I think you have
nowadays.
trouble with bikes, let alone
Do you? I
motorbikes.
see.
You can do bikes, but even they are limited. I mean,
But we took the motorbike with
Oh,
us.
really?
We took it up to the railway station the night before the wedding.
Right.
And then when we left the reception, and it was all done at home, at my wife's house. There was no, today people spend a vast fortune on weddings.
It's unreal.
But in those days there was very little. The photographer fitted himself in.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's,
Oh, they dominate the whole thing.
An hour's what have you. But
So where was the
much has
honeymoon?
changed. We had our honeymoon in Linton and Lynmouth.
Oh, the
And-
flood.
And do you remember there used to be, between Linton and
Oh, yes.
Lynmouth, there was a
Big
very
hill.
steep hill.
Yes.
And it was so steep, I think it was 1 in
Oh, it is
2 or
pretty
1 in
steep,
3.
yeah.
Terrible. And going up it, of course, the motorbike wouldn't carry my wife on the pillion, so she had to get off
And push?
and no, not push, but walk beside me till we got to the top.
I love it.
But it's very interesting because this comes into the story again because we went to the cinema and we saw Wuthering Heights.
This was in Linton or Lynmouth.
In Linton.
Right,
We
okay.
were staying in Lynmouth, which
Yes.
is just below it, you
Yes.
see. And the whole point was we sat in the front two seats of the circle.
Right.
But many years later, which I've come into when it comes, we knocked 5 hotels into one on the seafront of Bognor, and I wanted to have a little cinema there, so we bought the cinema in Linton, which happened to be up for sale. The contents.
Yes.
And I bought that, and I extracted those 2 seats that we'd sat in.
Lovely.
And I kept them over several years until our 50th wedding anniversary, when I had them recovered and I presented them to my wife.
Oh, and she loved it.
So that was a memory
of
Linton.
Yeah.
But it's these sort of things
Yes.
which make up life, really.
Oh, it is,
it?
indeed.
But
so you went, married, honeymoon, and now you've got to come back. You come back to London. You've got to live somewhere. You've got to get a job. You've got to support your family. So how did you do all of that?
The steel business
had been stolen.
Well, that's virtually what happened.
Yes.
He took all the money. But it's one of those things. And in those days, the dole was a pittance. People
Yes.
with any ambition didn't even apply for it. It was so small. It was like the equivalent of today. You would get a pound.
With
£2
sort of job
a week.
seekers allowance.
Oh, not that. That would be luxury.
Would
jobs.
it?
Oh, yes. It's absolutely minimal. You've no idea. People don't realise, and so people had to do something. If you wanted to live, you had to do something. Just as an example, today, if you live at home or you're at home, the number of callers, you're lucky if you get anyone other than the postman.
True.
But in those days, you'd have the door being knocked on all through the day. People from abroad, they'd be selling onions, the people with foreign things, with suitcases selling things, people knocking to see if you want your knives sharpened, if you wanted your windows cleaned.
True, it did happen,
and
yes.
People were having to do something to bring in a few pennies.
Yes.
And of course this is where things are so different today. Maybe it's better today, I don't know, but I think they've lost something. People haven't got that initiative to go out and work. So when I came, there was I'd married my wife, we came back, we were living temporarily in the top floor of my father's house.
Oh, right.
And just to show you how we put up with things which we wouldn't put up with today,
Right.
it was a top floor flat, and it had a kitchen, and the sink unit, there wasn't a sink in there.
Right.
So I bought a sink unit,
Yes.
and which we put on a couple of legs,
Right.
and we had a bucket underneath it. It wasn't plumbed in even.
Right.
So my poor wife,
Had to
every
carry it
drop
on.
of water had to be carried from that bucket and emptied down the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody put up with that today.
Now, the health and safety and the planning, we won't go there.
No, we won't go there,
because
no.
people really find it very difficult to even start, let alone...
But we thought we were lucky because
Oh,
we had
absolutely.
a flat.
Well, you had something that was yours.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean...
And so then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I think I mentioned last time I went to the library and I found this
Good place to go.
space selling.
Yes.
And I went down to Margate and I sold 10 of these spaces a day, and we cleaned up on it. And what was interesting there, memory comes back with that, was that one of the partners who were running this space business,
Yes.
he was so peeved because he'd been offered this powder, white powder. And
What, cocaine?
No.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I mean, it did happen in the 20s, 30s. But go on.
But he was offered this white powder,
Right.
Detergent.
Oh,
and,
right.
And he turned it down. He didn't think there was any future in it.
Well, as an agent, as a UK
No,
agent?
to take it over
right.
and do it, because it was a byproduct from coal.
Yes, right.
And he was offered it,
Right.
and he turned it down. And then, just while I was working with him, Tide was introduced, and it swept the country. Everybody bought it. It was like, it was like magic.
Oh, the washing powder white.
And so he was kicking himself because he could have
been in on the ground floor.
He could have had Tide, and he turned it down.
His whole life would have been different.
But anyway, to cut a long story short, there were 2 partners in that business. There was the Tide man and another man.
Yeah.
I don't know why they packed it in, because I think I was the only one who was selling.
Ah, right.
And but they packed up this space selling job. The other partner, of course, because he thought, well, here's a mug, here's somebody who can sell.
Right.
He said, come with me and help me take photographs.
Oh, right.
Now, my father was a photographer in the Navy and what have
Right.
you. So I was immediately interested, and we started going on my motorbike out to Norfolk.
Really?
Now, I don't know why we picked Norfolk, round the council estates.
Right.
And we used to go into the houses and say, we'll take pictures of your children free of charge.
Right.
And if you like them, you can buy them. If you don't like them, you needn't.
Right.
And fella's seen something, I don't know.
I think it's the hat.
It's
But go on.
It's something she can see.
She's earning her keep, though,
Oh,
Eric. I mean, that's what dogs are for.
Oh,
They're-
she's
you
a
know,
good one.
this is somebody new, and I don't like it.
But so we took these photographs, and
Right.
where we scored was, of course, we took 2 pictures of every child.
Yes.
Because, of course, it was all film in those days.
Yeah, it
and
was.
expensive, but we had them printed 6 inches by 8 inches.
Postcard. No.
Poster-
No.
bigger,
Full
big
profile.
size,
Yeah.
big size. And we used to take them in on a Saturday to the people,
After payday.
Friday or Saturday after payday,
Absolutely.
and say, well, look, here's the picture of your child.
Oh.
If you'd like it, I think we used to charge for one large one. I can't remember if it was framed or not, and 6 postcards. I think it was 27 and sixpence, £1.
Yeah.
5p,
Right.
which was a lot of money
It
in
was,
those days.
indeed
But you
it
see,
was.
the thing was, these people had never seen a big photograph of
Of
their
their-
child.
no, absolutely.
So what we did, they invariably ordered, we used to take the proof and mount it. So in other words, they got
Yeah.
the proof, they didn't get a
No.
mount it, print off the 6 postcards and go and collect our 27 and sixpence.
All
And
right.
it was a very profitable
Yeah.
business. It was very good. And on the
So who did all the darkroom kit
we-
work?
this partner of mine organised all
Did
of
he
that,
really?
so it was very good.
Because he must have been doing it pretty fast turnaround.
Well, it was very good.
Yeah.
But then, because it was going so well,
Yes.
we decided it'd be very nice. My wife was pregnant, and we
Right.
thought it'd be very nice to have our own house. And in those days, property, you couldn't find
No.
property. It was virtually, all the forces coming back, wanting houses, and there wasn't a
I
accommodation
mean, it was as
available.
bad then as it is now
Oh,
for
far,
young people.
far
you know.
worse, far worse. I can't describe it to you.
Right.
And so we found a nice little cottage in Hoxton, which was for rent.
Oh, right.
And so we rented it, and it was 2 cottages together and had an adjoining door, and the owner lived in the next cottage.
Oh, right.
But it's fascinating to think of the difference, because there was no water in the property.
No.
And so we had to take a bucket onto the village green. The cottage was next to the village green, and get the pump and pump the water into the bucket and carry it back.
Yeah.
There was a toilet at the bottom of the garden, so you had to walk to the bottom of the garden, which was virtually just a hole in the ground.
yeah.
You see, people forget
But no
all of
water
this.
rates to pay.
No water rates to pay,
No.
very low
the
expenses,
whole bit, yeah.
and but it was there I saw my first ghost.
Sorry?
My first ghost.
You mean as in something from beyond?
Beyond, yes.
Oh,
Well,
right.
I've got a theory about this. I'm not going to bore
No,
you
we
with
won't.
it. But
Are you
the
all
whole
right
thi-
with that, listener? I don't want you to be spooky and frightened. I really don't. If you're worried about ghosts, look away now. Right.
Well, it wasn't a nasty one. But what happened was I was standing in the kitchen,
Yes.
and looked round, I saw a man standing in the doorway.
Right.
And I thought, well, how's he got in?
I bet.
So there was a passage outside the kitchen. At the end of it was a door which led to a room which led to the front door, and there was a door at the end which went down to the cellar.
Ah, right.
So I immediately said, hey, what are you doing? And I went after him. He ran down the passageway and disappeared. And the door to the cellar was open.
Right.
So I immediately thought, oh, he's gone out through the front door.
Ah.
But of course it hadn't been, and the front door was locked. And I went back to the door to the kitchen with great trepidation,
I bet,
because I
yeah.
thought, well, he's down in the cellar. He's gone down there. And of course I went down there, nothing there. But then, of course, when I spoke to the lady next door,
She said, "You've seen our
Masters,"
ghosts.
no, she said, well, that's very odd. They'd never seen it before.
Oh, right.
This is very odd. She said, the man who I bought the cottage from, he committed suicide by throwing himself down those cellar
Down the
steps.
steps.
Now,
Oh,
I had no knowledge of that story at all.
No.
And so what did I see? It's, but I've got a lot of evidence of this in other things. I've got a very good theory about it.
You can look back now, viewer, because we're moving on to magic. And whether that was what we just talked about, I don't know. But on to magic, Eric. You've been saying that whilst you were there, you got back into magic. Would that be right?
Well, this was a bit later.
Because you've been doing magic all your life.
Let me finish off the Hoxton bit, because my wife was expecting a baby. It's another sign of the times, if you like to put it that way. And the baby was a stillbirth, unfortunately, at home.
Tragic.
And it was tragic. But the difference in approach in those days as today, the baby was born and it was bundled up in a blanket.
This was a midwife, was it?
Yes, and when the midwife left, she handed me the bundle of the baby.
Right.
You know, she said, well, you'll be able to dispose of that.
Right.
So, of course, I thought, well, you know, what do I do? So, being Roman Catholics, I got in touch with the Catholic priest.
Yes.
And he didn't want to know. He said
Really?
it was born dead. So, so I baptized the little dead body myself. Whether it was any good or not, I don't know.
No, but that's
but then I got in touch because it was the village green and there was a church there. It's a lovely little village green, or used to be at Hoxton.
Right.
And there was the church. So I went to the Church of England priest or vicar, and he was different approach altogether. He was an extremely nice man. He said, "Don't worry." He said, "We'll do it together."
Right.
And he gave me a spade. And we dug a hole. I dug a hole on the corner of the church. So at the corner of the church in Hoxton,
you
there's
got a child,
and which he said some nice little prayers. And we put him down there and covered it in, because my wife wasn't able to be there because she was obviously still in bed. Because now they get up immediately, the baby's born. But in those days, they used to stay in bed for 2 or 3 weeks. I think it was.
They often did.
Yeah,
but I understood that certainly in the Church of England that they often have an area around the graveyard, around the church, that is for stillbirths.
Is that so?
Yeah, we'll have to confirm with our vicar when next I see. But I've certainly heard that on Woman's Hour, because they've often said, you know, the support for particularly women who've carried a full babe to term.
Yes.
So you've gone through all of that,
yes,
and then you end up with a dead child.
Yes.
You know, the counselling, the support, because they do support each other. In fact, I'm very much aware that at Christmas time, Walton Church has a service for mums of those who either died, were stillbirth, or died very early.
I see. Oh, that's interesting.
Which is because it's a very emotional time, isn't it? So coming into Christmas, you would have had a child up.
Yeah.
But yes, so that is
approach completely.
It is, and that's a much more civilised one, isn't it?
But having come back to the story, because of the loss of the child, we thought, well, we'd get back to London, and I think at those days, I think petrol was still rationed. I can't remember.
Probably was.
But it was a very difficult period. But we came back to London, and of course I gave up that photographic work. And as you know, I've been doing a lot of magic over the years, and so I thought, well, let me go back to the stage and get some money that way. So I found myself an agent.
Did you really?
And I started fire eating, which I'd learnt fire eating in Burma. And an ordinary magic, and this agent used to get me some very good bookings.
Oh, excellent.
The best of which was, of course, the first Robin Hood, which was Richard Green. And
Robin Hood rushing through the glen.
That's
and all
right.
That jazz.
Yes.
That was every week, wasn't it? I vaguely remember.
I can't remember how
it was very popular for children.
There was a lot of episodes. I was in the episode called The Jongleur, where Robin went with me.
Oh, yes.
We went and entertained the Sheriff of Nottingham and then rescued somebody from it.
Some damsel?
Yeah, but I remember it vividly because he'd asked, you know, for a fairly big fee for me.
Yes.
And they turned it down. They got someone cheaper.
As they do.
And, of course, they couldn't cope with it. I don't know why. Right. So they took me after all, and I was paid £100 for that
this was
day's
in the 50s,
filming.
was it?
This was in probably 49, 50.
Yes,
and
that's a fee. That's a decent fee.
If you take it 100 times, it's £10,000 for a day's filming, so it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I remember it well, and there was, you know, a Little John, the great big man.
Yes.
I had a metal bowl,
right.
And of course I went like that to it, and it burst into flames.
Like a Merlin.
And then I went like that again to it, and it blossomed out in flowers.
Oh, I love it.
It's lovely. And it was only, you had to press the switches underneath.
Of course you
There was
did.
no difficulty.
Don't tell them the magic. You didn't see that. You didn't hear that. Right.
But he couldn't get it right.
Oh,
I'd do that, and there'd be a long pause, and then it would happen. It had to be done. So when I did that, he just pressed the right button.
Oh, right.
But he couldn't. We had to do 10 takes to get that,
Ooh.
but we got it. But the interesting part is that it's an episode called The Jongleur,
Yes.
this particular one, and about 2 or 3 years ago, Sky put it on again.
Did they?
And I got a £50 repeat fee.
And so you should.
Absolutely.
But have you got a copy of it yourself for the family archive?
I think I have somewhere. I must.
Yeah, you
try.
must sort that out.
I must sort
I
something
mean-
out of that. But that memory just comes back to
I
me.
think that's brilliant.
But,
I really do. I mean, I certainly enjoyed Robin
but-
Hood and Tonto and all those sort of. We used to have children's hour, didn't we? And,
That's
and that
right,
doesn't
yeah.
seem to be there
No,
now.
no.
You know, it was
But
sort of
with
older children.
With this entertainment, it was quite a problem because he was getting me bookings. One booking he got me was with a doctor's sort of meeting. They're having one of the big hotels in London.
Oh, yes.
All
Or
the
conference type
conference
thing.
type
Oh, right.
thing. All the doctors got. So I thought, what can I do which will interest them?
Mm.
And I thought, well, I know. I had a mind reading act.
Oh, did you?
And I thought, well, I won't put it over as a mind-reading act. I put it over as hypnosis.
Right.
And so I got to this thing. The fee for that was, I think, £15 for the evening.
Right.
And I got there, and I put this act on. I started off by getting one of their chairmen up on the stage.
Right.
And I put my hands on his back, and I said, now I'm going to influence your mind. And I take my hands away and you'll fall over backwards. And of course he fell over backwards.
That's it.
Nothing secret
No,
about it.
no,
It was
no.
quite easy to do. But the whole point was they were so impressed with it, they gave me a double fee.
Oh, very nice.
But it shows
Yeah.
you how, if you could hoodwink a whole conference hall of doctors,
Yeah.
it doesn't augur well for us.
No. Did you hear that, viewer? I mean, abandon hope now is what Eric seems to be saying. Because
I've
with
got-
magic you can.
Well, you can.
You
yes.
can. So, how long did you pursue your sort of magician? Did you sort of join the magic circle
No,
and all that
I've never
jazz? Yeah?
joined the magic circle.
So
All
you're
I
not-
was interested was making money out of it.
Well, you had
support
you
the
had family to get.
And
how many children did you have at this stage?
at that point, I think I'd have to check
Yes.
with my wife. I mean, I think we had one or two. I can't remember.
Oh, right.
But to cut a long story short, I was doing the magic, but I got involved with the Interval Club. Now, this was in Dean Street in London, in
Right.
Soho, and see, this is where life is so different then.
Right.
You'd get literally hundreds of young people coming into London
Mm.
to go on the stage, or because Variety was going full
Yeah.
blast, and it was theatres.
Television was running,
Well,
radio was running.
The television was very limited in those
Was it
days.
really?
I can't remember. It was an hour a day or 2 hours a day. It was very, very
Well,
little.
speaking as somebody who was living in the West Country, we didn't see it until the coronation,
Well, there you are.
when there was a massive
Don't
investment.
interrupt my
No.
line of thought, because at my old
No,
age...
you're there, because we've got a
um,
few minutes to wrap up.
Have we? Oh, good.
Yeah.
But where was I up to?
You were the Interval Club.
Oh, the
and-
Interval Club. This was started by... It shows there's always good people.
Yes.
She was blind, or half blind, Molly Hewitt.
Right.
And she had her mother, and she took over this building next to the synagogue in Dean Street. It was a large
Right.
building with a lift going up to it, and she did it at a very low rent for all these youngsters and people who were going for the stage,
Right.
to provide them with somewhere they could be safe.
Really?
Because they were
Yeah.
being exploited.
Oh,
this
and
is where
how.
the problem.
Yes.
And so I got very much involved with the Interval Club. I
Right.
became a director of it, in actual fact, to help to run it.
Right.
And they did. I can't speak highly enough about Molly Hewitt.
No.
And the stage, the paper, the stage. The man who owned that, he was on the committee with me,
Right.
running it, and I've still got £50.
Right.
When Molly died, I put £50 to one side to make a memorial in the Catholic church in the square next to Dean Street.
Right.
The top, to put a memorial there. One of these days I'll
You'll
get
do it.
round to doing that.
No,
I haven't
think
forgotten
No,
it.
you need to do it, Molly.
But I wrote to the present owner of the stage, I believe it's his daughter, and I never got a reply, unfortunately.
Oh, right.
So I thought, she might be like to get it organised.
Well, that sounds some unfinished business that you will need to go to and talk about Did you hear this? Did you hear this? Talking about finishing, we've reached the end of this session of Eric's This Is Your Life. Join us next week when we'll have a further riveting it will be an episode that whether we have it wasn't Graham Greene, it was Richard Greene. Richard Greene striding through as Robin Hood, or whether it will be Eric as a magician or whatever, and the next episode in your life.
Thank you
very much for that, Eric.
Good.
And look forward to the next one.
Thanks so much.